Two of the most powerful women in Hollywood walked onto the same stage, and the world stopped watching everything else. It was not a movie premiere or an award show. It was live television, and what unfolded on that stage would soon dominate every headline and social media feed for days. Viewers who tuned in to watch a casual morning interview on The View had no idea they were about to witness a real-life clash between Angelina Jolie and Meghan Markle that felt more like a courtroom showdown than a talk show chat. From the moment the camera started rolling, the energy felt different. Meghan sat at the center of the panel, perfectly poised, promoting her new charitable project that she claimed would reshape global conversations about compassion. She was calm, polished, and confident, clearly expecting a smooth segment filled with applause and polite questions. But then the mood shifted. The studio audience fell silent when the doors opened and a surprise guest walked in. It was Angelina Jolie, a woman whose very name carries weight in every conversation about real-world humanitarian work. What happened next was not scripted. It was not planned. It was a clash of ideals, egos, and authenticity that no one could have predicted. By the time the segment ended, the audience had witnessed one of the most shocking live television moments of the year. Viewers were left speechless, replaying the clip just to believe what they had seen. Before we dive into the heated exchange that left Meghan stunned and the hosts scrambling to cut to commercial, make sure you hit subscribe and drop a comment below, because what you are about to hear will redefine how you look at live television drama forever. The View studio buzzed with its usual energy that morning. The audience filled every seat. The bright lights reflected off the sleek stage, and the sound of chatter mixed with the upbeat theme music that opened the show. It felt like any other day at the talk show known for mixing sharp opinions with celebrity charm. But something about the air that morning felt charged, like a storm waiting to break. Whoopi Goldberg sat in her usual seat, calm and ready to steer the conversation. Beside her were Joy Behar and Sarah Haynes, both smiling and chatting as cameras moved into position. Everything looked routine, but the day's special guest brought a different kind of anticipation. Meghan Markle had arrived to promote her latest charitable initiative, a campaign focused on global compassion and mental health awareness. As the segment began, Meghan's confidence filled the room. She spoke with her familiar poise, every sentence perfectly measured, every gesture polished. The audience listened closely, nodding along as she described her new project. She looked completely in control, comfortable under the lights, surrounded by friendly faces. The hosts asked her about her vision, her experiences, and her plans for the future. Meghan answered smoothly, almost rehearsed, like she had delivered this speech many times before. Behind the scenes, producers moved quickly, exchanging quiet signals and whispers. Something was happening that Meghan did not know about. There had been talk of a surprise guest, someone who could offer a different perspective on humanitarian work, but no one on stage had been told who it would be. Meghan kept speaking, smiling for the cameras, unaware of what was about to unfold. The studio felt calm, but that calm carried a strange tension, like the moment right before thunder rolls across the sky. Everyone felt it, even if they could not explain it. Something electric was in the air, and no one knew why. As Meghan continued speaking, the audience's attention shifted toward the stage entrance. The cameras, still focused on her, caught a flicker of movement in the background. The studio doors opened, and a familiar figure stepped inside. The audience gasped softly before the producers even had time to cue the applause. Angelina Jolie had just walked into the View unannounced. For a moment, everything froze. The hosts turned their heads in surprise, unsure if this was part of the plan. Meghan's smile stayed fixed, but her eyes told a different story. The warmth in her expression vanished for a split second before she quickly recovered, pretending to welcome the unexpected guest. Angelina walked toward the table with quiet confidence, dressed simply but commanding every glance in the room. Her calm presence carried weight, and the silence that followed made it clear that everyone felt it. Whoopi rose from her seat, smiling wide to ease the tension. She announced that Angelina had stopped by to share her thoughts on international aid and women's rights. The audience applauded, though it sounded hesitant, as if no one quite knew what was about to happen. Angelina took her seat beside Meghan, greeted the hosts politely, and thanked them for letting her join. Meghan turned to her with a gracious nod. Her voice was smooth, but tight when she said, "It is such an honor to have you here, Angelina." Angelina smiled, but her eyes stayed steady, sharp, and unreadable. "The honor is mine," she replied softly. There was something in her tone that made everyone in the room feel like the air had dropped a few degrees colder. The camera panned across the table. Joy looked down at her notes. Sarah shifted in her chair. Whoopi forced another cheerful line to keep things moving. The audience clapped again, unsure whether to relax or brace for what was coming next. Meghan straightened her posture, determined to keep control of her spotlight. But from the moment Angelina sat down, it was clear that the balance on that stage had changed completely. The first few minutes of conversation between Meghan and Angelina seemed calm on the surface. Meghan kept her smile steady, guiding the discussion back to her new campaign. She spoke about collaboration, influence, and the importance of working within systems to create change. She gestured gracefully as she explained how she believed progress required diplomacy, partnerships, and strategic compassion. Angelina listened quietly, her eyes steady on Meghan. When the hosts turned to her for her thoughts, she leaned forward slightly and spoke in her calm, even voice. She said that she respected every effort to make a difference, but that real change often happens far away from cameras and conferences. She mentioned her own work in refugee camps, visiting war zones, and speaking directly to people who had lost everything. Then she said softly, "Some of us prefer to be on the ground, seeing the reality with our own eyes." The studio fell quiet. The words were polite, but the edge underneath them was clear. Meghan nodded, keeping her composure, but her posture shifted slightly. She crossed one leg over the other, smiled again, and said, "That is why I focus on creating awareness and building resources." Angelina smiled too, but it was faint. "Real change needs structure," she replied. "But so is presence. Sometimes people don't need another campaign. They need someone to actually show up." Joy laughed nervously and tried to move the topic to something lighter, asking both women about motherhood and balance. Sarah added a quick joke about time management, but neither Meghan nor Angelina seemed to hear it. Their eyes met for a brief second, and the tension between them tightened like a wire. The audience could feel it, even if no one said it out loud.
Whoopi jumped in with another question about teamwork and charity work, trying to steer the tone back to friendly discussion. Meghan answered first, her voice a little sharper now, saying she believed collaboration was key, especially when everyone stayed in their lane. Angelina's eyebrow lifted slightly, and her lips curved into a quiet, knowing smile. She did not interrupt. She did not need to. The audience did not yet realize that what they were seeing was just the warm-up. The discussion grew heavier with every question. Meghan shifted the tone back to her project, speaking about the importance of public engagement and how emotional storytelling helps inspire people to give. She said sometimes charity work needs to feel powerful and cinematic to reach hearts around the world. It sounded like a compliment to Angelina's career, but her smile told a different story. The co-hosts nodded politely, unaware that Meghan's next line would light the fuse. She looked toward Angelina and said, "I think it is wonderful when people use their platforms to highlight causes, but it can sometimes turn into something that feels theatrical. You know, when emotion becomes the focus more than the actual issue." The audience fell silent. The word theatrical hung in the air like smoke. Angelina turned her head slowly, her expression calm, but her eyes sharp. She took a small breath before answering. "Well," she said, "some of us have been in places where there is nothing theatrical about what we see. When you sit in a tent with a mother who has lost her children, or watch a hospital run out of medicine, there are no cameras. There is no applause. There is only reality. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A few murmurs rippled through the audience. Meghan tried to smile, but her composure cracked just slightly. She brushed a strand of hair from her face and replied, "Of course, and that is why awareness is so important. People need to see those stories, to understand them. That is the role of influence. Without it, those realities remain invisible." Angelina nodded, her tone steady. Yes, awareness matters. But awareness without presence can start to look like performance. Her words landed like a quiet blow. Even the hosts froze for a second, unsure whether to intervene or let it continue. Whoopi tried to cut in with a quick comment, laughing lightly and saying, "Both of you are making great points here." But the laughter did not catch on. The room felt too tense for jokes. The camera zoomed in on Meghan's face, her smile tight, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. Angelina leaned back in her chair, hands folded neatly in her lap. Her calm presence made Meghan's nerves more visible. The energy had changed completely. The conversation no longer sounded like a discussion between two public figures. It sounded personal, as if something deeper was being challenged. The audience did not move. Every eye was fixed on the two women as the air grew thick with silence. The tension had gone beyond polite disagreement. It was no longer about ideas or charity or influence. It was about pride. And everyone in that studio could feel it building towards something that neither of them would be able to take back. The silence after Angelina's last words felt endless. Meghan tried to hold her ground, but her voice carried a sharp edge now. She shifted in her seat, forcing another smile that no longer looked natural. The cameras glanced between the two women, unsure if the conversation had gone too far. Whoopi reached for her cue cards, but before she could speak, Meghan did. She leaned forward slightly and said, "It is easy to talk about being on the ground when you have the means to do it. Some of us focus on creating systems that help people long term. Not everyone can just fly around the world collecting stories or children." The last word hit the air like a slap. The room froze. No one breathed. The sound from the audience stopped completely. The camera stayed fixed on Meghan's face, and even she seemed to realize what she had just said. Her smile faded, and her eyes darted toward the hosts, who sat stunned. Joy's mouth opened slightly. Sarah lowered her gaze, and Whoopi looked straight into the camera, searching for direction from the producers. Angelina did not speak right away. She sat perfectly still, her expression calm but unreadable. The tension was so heavy that even the faint buzz of the studio lights felt loud. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and steady. "You mean my children," she said softly. "The ones who survived war, famine, and loss before they could even walk. The ones I held when no one else would. Those children?" The audience gasped, and someone in the back whispered, "Oh my God." The camera zoomed in on Angelina's face, capturing the quiet fire in her eyes. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Her calm cut through the silence like a knife. Meghan's posture collapsed slightly. Her hands trembled as she tried to respond, but no words came out. She looked trapped, realizing the weight of what she had implied. The room no longer felt like a talk show. It felt like a courtroom, and the verdict had already been delivered. Angelina turned toward the hosts and said softly, "Children are not trophies. They are lives that deserve love, not judgment." Her words echoed through the studio. Meghan looked down, unable to meet her eyes. The cameras captured every second, every flicker of regret. By the time the commercial break was called, the damage had already been done. When the show returned from its break, the energy in the room had completely changed. The audience that had once been buzzing with excitement now sat in complete silence. The tension was thick, and every camera stayed locked on Angelina Jolie. She sat poised, collected, and calm. Meghan looked smaller beside her, still trying to piece together her composure. Whoopi tried to lighten the moment, but Angelina gently raised her hand. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had lived through too much to play along. You know, she began, I have spent most of my adult life outside of studios like this one. Not in green rooms or at premieres, but in refugee camps, hospitals, and schools that barely had roofs. When you hold a child who has lost their entire family, you stop thinking about optics. You stop worrying about how you look. You start thinking about how to keep that child alive. The crowd listened quietly. Every word felt deliberate. She began, people like to talk about raising awareness. That is important, yes, but awareness means very little if it ends at a social media post. I have seen mothers walk 10 miles just to get medicine that costs less than a cup of coffee. Awareness doesn't help them unless it turns into action. Real action changes lives. Posts and slogans only change algorithms. Meghan shifted slightly, trying to smile through the moment. She spoke carefully. But awareness inspires others to act. It gives a voice to causes that need attention. Angelina nodded politely, then responded with a quiet certainty. Yes, it can. But what happens when the performance becomes the point? When the spotlight matters more than the solution? She leaned forward slightly. There is a difference between doing good and being seen doing good. One saves lives. The other sells stories. The words hung in the air. Meghan tried to reply, but her voice faltered. I think visibility has power. Angelina's gaze stayed soft, not cruel, but piercing in its truth. Visibility does have power, but power means responsibility. You cannot ask to lead change if you only show up for the cameras. People remember who stayed after the cameras left. The audience was still frozen. Even the hosts were silent, letting the moment breathe. Angelina continued, her tone gentle now, almost reflective. We live in a world where compassion is often turned into content. I just believe it should stay real. Because the people who are hurting the most, they don't care about hashtags. They care about help. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. Then a quiet ripple of applause began in the crowd. It grew slowly, turning into a standing ovation. Meghan sat still, nodding faintly, her smile tight but controlled. Angelina looked down, humbly accepting the moment, not as a victory, but as a truth that needed to be said. The room felt changed, as if everyone there had just witnessed something far deeper than a talk show argument. It felt like a reckoning. The silence after Angelina's words felt endless. Meghan sat stiff in her chair, her polished smile starting to fade. The bright studio lights that once made her glow now seemed harsh. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to straighten her notes, but the papers shook. The cameras caught everything, every breath, every flicker of panic in her eyes. She tried to speak, her voice softer now. I never meant for this to sound like a performance, she said, forcing a small laugh that fell flat. I care deeply about people too. But her words no longer carried the same confidence. They sounded unsure, fragile. The audience did not respond. They just watched. Meghan's gaze